Okay, so let's get started with why we're here today, which is communicating student learning. Lovely to have you join on a gorgeous day across BC, it looks like, and on Valentine's Day, where you have probably had a very busy day with your kiddos. So, communicating student learning will focus a bit more on descriptive feedback, that aspect of communicating student learning. We have our handouts and all the links for this presentation available on our POPEY website. There's the link. And be sure to connect with us online at poppy.poppybc for Twitter and Instagram. I have to say that because our communication manager is here with us today, so she's our promoter. Thanks, Chelsea. So I'm here presenting today, co-presenting with Calico, lovely Calico. She's going to
Oh,
be
hi,
doing a
everybody.
lot. Yeah, thanks. She's going to be doing a lot of the background stuff for me today and monitoring the chat box. Okay, so today, as I mentioned, we're going to be focusing in on that descriptive feedback aspect of reporting and really using that strength-based language and connecting that to the curricular learning areas that we need to report on. So let's take a quick look at our BC curriculum model and remember that, of course, it is concept-based and competency-driven, and that's going to be really important as we talk about why we're reporting a little bit differently now with the new reporting order here in BC, so that we can focus in on those learning standards in both the curricular competency areas and the content learning standards. So that's what we're required to report out on. The big understandings are there to help us plan and guide our teaching in the classroom, but we are reporting out on those learning standards. And we'll get a little bit more into that as the hour goes on. So, key thing to remember is that the assessment that we are focused in on BC is formative and differentiated. So, in primary classrooms, this has been super evident for a very long time. We in primary classrooms are quite used to that formative style of assessment and really infusing our assessment into the learning cycle and then co-constructing it with our students so that they know where we're going, what our key objectives are, and what proficiency looks like in different areas. So this isn't necessarily, I would say, this is a big learning area for the upper grades as they adjust to our new reporting policy. But in primary, this is what we've kind of always done. We've always really had our child-centered approach. We know our children are very different in different ways, so we've always had a quite differentiated aspect of assessment, and the reporting order just highlights that for our primary classrooms. And then I just love these wise words of Joe Crona. Infusing formative assessment into the learning cycle enables responsive teaching. And again, our prime in the early years, we know this, we've been living this. But we differentiate instruction and assessment to ensure that we are providing access points for all our students in our schools. Okay, so why are report cards changing? What has happened? And basically, this is straight out of our facilitator's guide, but really it's all about how learning has changed and that the expectations that we need to teach children how to be successful in a world that we don't know what it's going to look like. It's changing so rapidly that we don't know what our students are going to need to know when they enter the workforce. So that's the idea behind having like a really competency-based curriculum so that we're giving them important skills like thinking and communicating and solving problems so that they are able to be successful in the world that we're not sure what it's going to look like. So very different from the learning all the content, and you'll you'll be able to apply that in different ways. We're teaching our students to be really competent with competencies. And because we have this, I have to stop calling it the new curriculum because it's been around for so long now, but with the curriculum that we haven't really aligned our reporting policies or our report cards to the curriculum that we have in order to ensure that we are aligned there. So that's why we're doing the change now. I wanted to highlight early on in this presentation that we have a lot of very important play-based learning opportunity, play-based assessment opportunities with our students. And again, these have been around. This is nothing new, but they are very effective ways of getting information about our children and what they can do in different ways. So these are highlighted and through the early learning framework and again in the reporting policy that um, assessment in our early years looks a little different, and it is completely valid and completely appropriate to assess our students' oral responses, visual responses, physical responses, and then, of course, that really important aspect of pedagogical narration that we find in our early learning framework, where it provides a way that we can document what we observe and how we can share that out as an area of significance that we've noticed in how our students are learning. Also, that important piece of self-assessment and co-constructed criteria with our students is just so important in their early years, not only so our children feel that they are a part of the assessment process, but that they are really the drivers of their learning. So they can really feel that they have a place in where their learning is going and how to get there. Okay, here is our provincial proficiency scale. This document is available and the previous one on our POPEY website under resources, which Chelsea put into the chat box there. So if there's anything, I'll be referring to what is POPEY created so that you can find it easily on our website. And this is obviously our provincial proficiency scale, but just adding in that literacy definition, and then the important part of putting it into child-friendly language. So we know what emerging, developing, proficient, and extending means in our teacher world, but it's even more important that our students know what these um, different describing words mean in terms of their learning and as course as they're self-assessing and thinking of goals and being part of their learning experience. So I'm beginning in my learning, developing, I'm learning more on my own and need more practice. Proficient, I get it and can show you how much I understand. And then extending, I get it and I go beyond what is expected of me. And I'll just point out that our goal with students is is proficient. So we're not striving for all of our students to be extending, that we are striving for our students to be proficient. So that's our focus. Okay, so I was in Mishi Stevens' grade 2-3 class in Gibson's Elementary last year, and she was using these posters quite regularly with her students. So I wanted to share with you how she's using them, and also I asked her if we could share them more widely across the province for anyone that wanted them. So they are on our website. You can find them there, and she, of course, was very gracious with her sharing and she wants people to use them, so help yourself. So how she uses them in her classroom is she has these posters made up and they're on magnet backing. So she just keeps them on her whiteboard all of the time. And every time that they're doing a different activity or she needs to refer to them, she'll just bring one out and say, oh, what would proficient look like in this um, activity that we're doing? And they provide a lot of um, common language for her students to use, and also for the students to have a really clear idea about what the learning objectives are and what proficiency, what are proficient indicators for each of the activity that they participate in. And what I love, I'll tell you in a moment, I just want to show you first. So emerging, I'm just getting started. I learn best with help. Developing, I understand some of it, and I'm beginning to do more and more of it on my own. And then proficient, I understand and can do it with my toolbox. Now, I absolutely love this one because her students explained to me that they were having a conversation about proficient, and in the previous wording, she had, I can understand and do it and do it independently. And they had a discussion about what about accommodations and what about when you need that toolbox, those tools in your toolbox in order to reach our goals. That's okay. That should be part of what we're looking for. So she actually changed the poster, added the little toolbox. Isn't that so cute? And changed the language there. So it was very much a co-creation and communication discussion with her students. And then, of course, extending, I understand and go beyond. And her students have a very clear understanding that they are striving for proficiency within the activities that they do. Okay, so what is descriptive feedback? So we'll zero in a little bit on the descriptive feedback aspect of reporting. So this is straight out of the reporting policy as well. And it's basically, we want to ensure that it's strength-based. So it's documented, either comments or documented conversations, strength-based about the learning standards. So that's both the content and the curricular learning standards. So we're describing student learning as well as any specific area for student growth. Feedback is based on what the students can do and what they're working towards. So that's going to lead us to that strength-based language when we're really focused on what our students can do and what next steps are. So I wanted to point that out, and we're going to see some examples of that in a moment. And this short little video is from the Central Okanagan School District, and we'll take a moment as they describe it in SD23 for us. So one thing that I noticed about that, the uh, the example there, was that it was clear and concise where the child was and that the teacher really knew the child. So when parents were polled in the process of creating the new reporting order, what they said they really wanted to see was that their child's name was used throughout the report and that it was very clear and concise how their child was doing and that the teacher knew who the child was. So I know that when I was writing report cards, um, I would include like a big, huge paragraph, or often I was very wordy, so often it was more than a paragraph about everything that we were doing in the classroom. Because of course I wanted to celebrate all that we were doing in the classroom, and everything seemed so important. The feedback that I got from parents was that they knew what was happening in the classroom because of all the other aspects of communication that I had in the classroom, like our newsletters and our my students would write um, letters home to their parents every week and things like that, explaining what was going on. So I didn't necessarily need to have a huge page of everything that was happening in the classroom, but but what they wanted was a concise aspect of what their student was learning and how they were doing with that. So I appreciated that about the example here from SD23 there. So it was mentioned about plain language suggestions in the video that we just watched. And I realized that we use a lot of teacherese when we're talking to each other and when we're writing. And it is a good reminder to think of our parents that um, not only will probably not be educators to understand our teacherese, but also they are coming from different backgrounds with different multiple language abilities, and we need to be able to provide that really plain language for all of our parents to understand. So there are a couple of examples there that might be helpful. This is on our website as well, but possible sentence starters when you're communicating student learning. I think for me, like, okay, so focusing in on strengths, areas for improvement, and ways to support learning or next steps. So I think sometimes I have in my head exactly what I know what I want to say, but I don't know how to say it or write it in this case. And sentence starters are a really great way to just get started on what you want to write and make sure that there's a variety of sentence starters when you're talking about the strengths. And so I found this really helpful when thinking about all of the writing that you need to put into your reports. It's already very daunting. So any possible areas that can help and make this an easier process, I think are welcome. So you can find that on our website. And this is another one. This one isn't on our website, but it's right out of the reporting order or the reporting framework. And it's optional sentence starters for each of those categories. So for emerging, developing, proficient, and extending. And again, it's just something to hang on to, even have right printed out beside you as you're writing reports, and can be a helpful way to not get bogged down on things that you don't want to get bogged down on, like how do I start a sentence? Okay, so thinking about how we can gather and evaluate assessment information, there's lots of different ways that we can gather assessment information. It does not have to be back in the day when I was going to school, a lot of it was collected through testing, through writing, but now we have so many different ways that we can gather that information. We can have podcasts, we can have conferences, there's portfolios that are very popular around the province. We can have oral responses, interviews, so many different ways that we can get an idea of what our students know. And then there's different ways that we can evaluate that, what they know. We can, a very important way is to have student self assessments or self reflections. As I mentioned earlier, we're inviting our students into the process of assessment so that it's not this foreign thing that they don't know what they're going to try and get to. When we invite them into those to the self-assessments and self-reflections, we are inviting them into their learning journey and to see where they are in their learning journey and how they can move forward as well. Okay, I was working with a teacher last year and she said, you know what would be really helpful is just to have like a quick checklist that I can have my learning goals really visible at the top and then the student language, the ICANN language right below, so that at a glance I can grab it on a clipboard, I can go around the class, get an idea of my students and who's doing what. And then she said, but I really want to focus on the fact that it's not just a product that I'm assessing. I want to focus. So I made this checklist for her, and it's on our POPEY website in a Word format so that you can adapt it and change it and add to it. But she said, I really want to focus on the fact that conversation and observation are just as important as product. So we highlighted that, and she wanted that front and center for a reminder for her when she was working with her students. So that is a very huge area of feedback that we can get from our students. So if you have any other ideas about how you would use that book in the classroom, you can pop them into the chat box. Okay, so I'm going to continue here. When we're thinking about assessment and reporting, there is a couple of steps that might be helpful as we consider how to make the process like really seamless and make sure that we're using that curriculum language and that we are able to teach the learning standards and then really easily report on them because it's a forethought of exactly what are we going to be teaching out of the curricular competencies and the content. So a suggestion that came out of the reporting policy is to identify, of course, the learning standards that we're going to explore, and then develop those learning goals in teacher and student-friendly language. And we'll see an example of this in a moment. Develop our plan, which we always do as teachers, and have students participate in those or learning opportunities that we're setting up for them, that we're having them experience, collecting some evidence of learning, providing that descriptive feedback that's ongoing. So our students are really with us in that learning journey, and then making some recommendations on next steps. And of course, having our students have some opportunity to self-reflect. So that's a really nice overview of how we can incorporate both the planning, the teaching, and the assessment piece with our students. And this document is on our website as well. Okay, so another document that's on our website is this one that we made to help that planning process be a little bit easier. So sometimes when we have a framework or graphic organizer, it just gives us room to fill in the different areas that we might have been thinking about them, or they might be on 17 different post-its in our planning book. And this is just a document that you might find helpful so that you can have something that's right in front of you. So it is editable on our website, so you can download that if you would like. But basically looking at the curriculum. What are our learning standards? What are our learning goals? So that is directly related to what are we assessing. Collecting that evidence of learning, how are we going to collect it? And how are we going to have our students represent their learning? We might have multiple ways. And then how are we going to have our students communicate their learning? Is it through an interview? Is it through um, writing that they're creating? And then what other considerations do we need to think about First People's principles of learning, core competencies, and any adaptations, modifications, or extensions? So again, just hopefully a document that might be helpful in your planning. And that is important because, as you can see, when we're looking at um, the reporting aspect, if we have really clear language around what the learning intentions are and what we're going to be assessing, that seamlessly goes into how we can write that report with making it as easy as possible, because we're just pulling right from that document that we've already built at the beginning, or whenever we're starting a new learning unit. So developing indicators for proficiency, which is directly out of our curriculum, because if we look at our curricular learning standards, that is our indicators of proficiency, because students will be able to identify and describe settings, characters, and events using a few details. So it's right there. That shows what proficiency looks like with our curriculum documents. Easy peasy. So I picked 3 different areas that are right out of the curriculum in the grade 1 curriculum that I would build some learning events around, and that is exactly what I'm going to be reporting on as well. Then the super fun part is just putting it into student-friendly language so that our students know exactly what we're learning and what proficiency looks like in that case. So I can tell you about settings, characters, and events using some details. And even having those descriptors, that learning, those indicators of proficiency around the classroom, they're visible. Students know what the expectations are. We are clear what the expectations are, so that it's a constant self-reflection for our students and a constant reminder for us where we're going with our learning and what we're going to be reporting on. Okay, so here is an example of a report card based on those learning goals. So this is a grade 1 student in English language arts, and the student is developing. So sometimes that is listed right in the first sentence of the report. Some districts are requiring or asking for that. Sometimes it's listed like it is kind of on this example where it's ELA developing at the top. So you could refer to your district about what their expectations are around that. So it says, Clea is interested in reading stories about animals in her classroom. She makes meaningful connections when discussing her reading with educators and other students. She's able to read basic books, and that has helped her progress in her reading ability to move towards more complex texts. She's able to discuss character setting and events in detail. When writing words, Clea can usually write the first sounds and last sounds correctly. Both at home and at school, the next steps for Clea would be to practice saying words slowly and matching the words in books with the words she is saying. She can also practice trying to write vowel sounds in her words. So when we break that down, this is everything. I'm reporting on Clea as a whole child, but it's everything that she can do. Listed out in blue, her areas of strengths, very, very clear and color coded there for you. Areas of growth, we're moving towards more complex text. That would be an area of growth for Clea. And clearly, what are the next steps? What are the steps that we're going to be working on at school that can be supported at home? So, practicing words slowly, matching the words in books with the words she's saying, and writing those sounds, vowel sounds in her words. So, very clear cut description for our parents on Clea as a learner that are connected to the learning goals that I just mentioned in the previous slide. Okay, so let's take a look at another aspect of reporting, which is looking at our self-reflection and goal setting. So as I mentioned, hugely important. There's a lot of research on the importance of self-reflection and of our students to be very mindful of their learning and where they are going with their learning and how it's all going. So I'm going to show you some examples of some core competencies, self-assessment in a moment, and a couple of goal setting. I want to actually create a new goal setting document for POPEY that I haven't quite got my head around exactly how I want it to look yet. So if anyone has any ideas or anything else that would be helpful that we can create, just pop them in the chat box or email me later. But basically, we really want our students have to help our students work towards future possibilities while they're developing confidence, knowledge, and competencies. So we want them to be part of the journey. We want them to be thinking about themselves as a learner, to see themselves as a learner who has agency that to change their trajectory of their learning if needed, adapt, nudge, look at things a different way, just like we saw in the read aloud with RJ. Okay, something else we have on our POPEY website is growth over time. That might be helpful when you're considering goal setting. And as I mentioned, this is right on our website if that's helpful. We can have our students use this as a document to reflect on with us if that's appropriate in your setting. And think of goal setting as a very positive way that we interact with our own learning. We all, as adults, have goals as well, and it is a powerful way to feel that sense of accomplishment over time, that we've set a goal and that we're reaching different aspects of it is allows us to have a huge influx of serotonin in and that's a feel good hormone. Yeah, what am I saying? So it's going to like provide that feel good feeling, and that's what we want our students to feel as they set goals and accomplish them. Neurotransmitter, that's what I was trying to say. Okay, here's another way that we can look at exploring students' work. In that conversation with students, if we have a student work sample as a third reference point to reflect on with our students, that's very helpful for us to collectively decide what are your strengths and what are some areas of growth that we could work on together. And with that point of reference, it is a very concrete example rather than us having an abstract idea about um, self-reflection and goal setting and um, giving them something very tangible to hold on to and refer to. And this is on our website as well. Okay, so let's take a moment to really think about what a third point reference can be as we reflect with students or about students with other teachers too. So I'm going to ask you in the chat box if you could think of an area of strength for this writing sample in front of you. Obviously, you don't know the student, so it's a little tricky, but see if you can come up with an area of strength and pop it into the chat box. Excellent. So we have spaces in between words, definitely. Thanks, Cheryl. Lots to say about friendship. Clear topic. Yes, absolutely. And willing to take risks. Absolutely. Thank you so much. All of those would be really, really wonderful ways to talk about the student. Now, what about areas for growth? Could be focusing in on the content or on the conventions, high frequency words, expanding ideas. Wonderful. Yeah, beginning to use punctuation, so a little gentle nudge in that direction. Capital letters at the start of sentences only, absolutely. So lots of different ways that we can engage with our students around this. Now, what about next steps? I think that really a lot of your next steps were your areas of growth, but is there one clear one that you would maybe take with a student in particular without knowing them that well, other than their sample? I love the language listed here. Continue to practice. Needs more time to, should continue to. It's invitational rather than you should or you need to. One of the one of the best sentence starter or yes, best sentence starters that I've heard recently and I continue to use often when working with children is I think you're ready. I think you're ready for. And I love that language because it is very positive, strength-based, invitational, rather than you need to or you should. If I was learning a new skill, like I started to uh, take some golf lessons last summer, and I needed that. Like I think you're ready for, as a way to like boost what I've come from and where I'm going. So I appreciate that. Okay, thank you so much for putting those areas into the chat box. Yeah, definitely. Long vowel sounds in your writing. Continue to work on that. Okay, so let's jump up to the core competencies. All of the documents that I'm going to share with you now are also on our website, and they were created back when we started working with core competencies in BC. So I just wanted they have been shared widely, these documents, but I wanted to remind you that they're there. And if there's any new teachers, beginning teachers out there or new to our province, then you know where to go to find them. So these are all listed under the assessment portion of our resources. And I just pulled out communicating, but we have all of the core competencies available for reflection and self-assessment. Okay, so we really simplified the language from the Ministry of Education's profiles on the core competencies and wanted some way to have friendly I statements that are that teachers can use with children to assist that that idea that may be abstract around reflection and self-assessment. So there's different ways that we can fill these in. We can write, we can draw, we can put an image, video. Lots of people, lots of teachers across the province are doing a lot of digital reflections that are accessible through portfolios or different means um, along with their reporting. Okay, so this is an example of what it could look like. We have an I statement over here. I talk and listen to people I know. And then how I showed this. And this is just blank, and children can fill it in as they want to. I just shared how it could look with a quick sentence. I shared my story with friends and a photo of story workshop that the student used to share their story with others. Again, these are, as I mentioned, they're on our website, but they're in PowerPoint format. So you can change them, adapt them, print them, do whatever you need to do to make them your own and make them work for your students in your class, in your setting. I collect basic information I need and present it. So here, another really basic sentence. I found color words and shared with friends. Of course, these can be drawings, they can be whatever you need them to be in your classroom. And then in this example, I just wanted to show what it could look to have our students do some labeling with our early learners. That doesn't They don't need to write in complete sentences. They don't have to write in words at all. But this could be a helpful way to bridge that beginning writers in our worlds. So they're reading together, there's a book, there's friends, and that's how they engage in conversations for different reasons. Okay, so that is right on time there. I'm just looking at the clock. So what we've done in the past hour or so is took a look at the proficiency scale. Remember those proficiency pigs that might be helpful in with your kiddos. Looked at descriptive feedback around plain language sentence starters, different ways to gather assessment knowledge, evidence, and then really making sure that our reporting is based on our curriculum learning standards. So having those in direct connection will be easier for you in the long run for reporting because you know exactly what you're going to be reporting on. You have a clear idea of what proficiency indicators look like, so everything's aligned. And then I hope that there could be some help in the planning supports, and then of course remembering that those core competency documents are there as well. So if you could think of one thing that might be helpful in your classroom or role and share it in the chat box, we would love to hear from you. Head over to our sources that we use to build this workshop for you today. So if there's anything there that is helpful, and of course, a lot of the resources that I shared are on our POPEY website, so please check it out and see what we have there. They're all under resources. A lot of them are under assessment or BC curriculum if it's specific to the reporting aspect. And reach out in the future if you have any questions, have any thoughts, if there's anything that you can think of that would be really helpful for us to create in Poppyland for you. I'm not committing to anything um, complex, but we want to help in any way that we can. So just please let us know.